She laughed at human Mercenary's weakness until he carried her across lava. The ancient sanctum trembled around them, its obsidian pillars humming with the fading echoes of forgotten rites. Princess Kaelira stood before the containment lattice, amber eyes wide and unwavering, reflecting the shifting glow of the Solus core, a swirling orb of raw stellar force, small enough to fit in her palm, yet powerful enough to restore her dying world's light. Dust from centuries of neglect streaked her auburn hair, framing the ritual markings that curled along her high cheekbones. She pressed her palm to the glyph-etched pedestal, fingers tracing the activation sigils in practiced, reverent motions. Her voice, steady despite the tremors beneath her feet, carried the ancient Lisari invocation. Each syllable vibrated in the heavy air, and the containment field flickered, threads of light unraveling with a hiss. The lattice collapsed with a breathless sigh. Kaelira drew in the radiance, cradling the core. Its warmth filled her chest, a golden hope to reignite her people's dying sun. A voice, sharp and urgent, shattered her focus. Kaelira, we're out of time. Rhys stepped from the shadowed archway, battered exosuit catching stray glimmers of sanctum light. Scorched plating and faded insignia told a story of battles survived, of a man who met danger head-on. His blue-gray eyes swept the chamber with soldier's efficiency, noting threats, exits, and the uncertain princess before him. "Show some reverence, human," Kaelira snapped, though her pulse betrayed her with a flutter. She squared her shoulders, cradling the core. "This relic is our salvation." Rhys's lips twitched, half amusement, half grim resolve. "And my job's to make sure you live long enough to use it." He checked his sidearm, the weapon's sheen dull in the sanctum gloom. Another tremor rippled through the floor. A fine rain of obsidian fragments drifted down from the domed ceiling. Kaelira staggered, her boots skidding on polished stone. Rhys moved with uncanny speed, his hand steadying her arm, grip warm and sure beneath the cold metal of her gauntlet. The contact lingered, a silent promise. Protection, not just duty. "The planet's destabilizing," he said, voice taut. "We've got maybe 5 hours. We've burned through 3. As if in response, a quake hit with greater force, the ground cracking open in jagged lines. Harsh crimson emergency beacons blinked to life, painting the ancient hall in panicked color. "The seers of Lys warned this would happen," Kaelira murmured, fingers trembling as she sealed the core in a containment case at her belt. With the core removed, Lyre's heart unravels. "We have until the world tears itself apart." "Then we get moving." Rhys jerked his head toward a side corridor, voice brooking no argument. "My ship's 20 kilometers north." "The path won't be easy." Kaelira shot him a glare as she followed, claws flexing out from her gauntlets as she powered up her energy caster. "I'm not helpless, mercenary. I trained with the Blade Guard for half my life." Rhys's mouth quirked. "Good. I won't have to carry you." They strode through the main hall, boots echoing between statues of long-dead Lysari champions. Cloaked in centuries of dust and silent accusation, the effigies watched with blank, obsidian eyes. The air itself seemed to tighten, buzzing with ancient power and imminent disaster. Rhys's scanner beeped, shrill and insistent. He raised a hand, palm flat. Kaelira froze, every muscle tensed. Footsteps, heavy and purposeful, echoed from the far archway, a cadence too precise to be the sanctum's settling stones. "We're not alone," Rhys whispered, voice barely audible above the distant rumbles. From the gloom strode a band of Noxian raiders, armor smeared with crimson war paint, guns bristling at their sides. At their head, Varco's Steeljaw's silhouette dominated, his cybernetic jaw gleaming with cruel polish. His eyes, pale and pitiless, locked onto Kaelira, hunger and malice written in every line of his scarred face. "Princess," Varco sneered, voice metallic. "Hand over the core, and we might let you die quick." Kaelira's lips curled in scorn. "I'd rather see you consumed by magma." Reese eased his rifle up, stance coiling for violence. The air stilled, thick with the promise of blood. The sanctum shuddered as another quake struck, raining debris and choking clouds. Last chance, Varkos growled, raising his twin blasters. Before the threat could take shape, the fight erupted in chaos. Kaelira darted behind a toppled idol, energy caster snapping with blue-white bolts. Her movements were balletic, each roll and pivot seamlessly transitioning into a shot aimed at armor joints or exposed cybernetics. A raider lunged. She dispatched him with a sidestep and a burning arc to the throat. Reese was a storm unleashed. Where Kalira was precise, he was overwhelming. His rifle roared, its shots scattering enemies. A grenade tumbled from his belt, blooming in a sphere of fire and shrapnel. Noxians reeled, regrouped, and attacked with savage cries. Kalira saw a blade flash at her side. A Noxian, quick and vicious. Before she could react, Reese was there, catching the assailant's arm and driving his own knife through armor. "Watch your flank," he barked, eyes fierce and protective. She met his gaze for a heartbeat, breathless at his ferocity. Across the hall, Varkos unleashed a fusillade of energy bolts, sending shards of obsidian and slivers of gold flying. Kalira's armor shrieked warnings as she ducked behind a broken pillar. "There's too many, and the sanctum's collapsing!" she shouted, voice edged with panic. Another quake split the floor, beams crashing down in an avalanche of noise. Reese surged forward, switching to his sidearm as ammo ran low. He snatched a fallen blaster, wielding it like a club, and battered a path toward Varkos. The raider leader raised his weapon, but Reese hurled him bodily into a pillar. The impact sent Varkos sprawling, teeth bared in pain. The rest of the raiders, seeing their leader defeated, broke ranks and fled into the shadows. For a moment, only the roar of settling stone and the ragged sound of breathing filled the hall. Kalira pressed a hand to her chest, core case secure. "Thank you," she managed, voice shaky. Reese reloaded, gaze softening for a fraction of a second. "Just doing my job." But he remained at her side, every sense tuned to danger, always interposing himself between her and harm. Through shattered windows, the sky was a tapestry of fractured light as Lyre's atmosphere began to buckle. "The main exit's blocked," Reese said, scanning the tumbling wreckage. "We'll have to find another way." Kaelira nodded, checking the containment field at her belt. As they hurried deeper into the sanctum's labyrinthine underbelly, she let her gaze linger on the mercenary's powerful frame, his every move precise and purposeful. The memory of his strength, of his hands, steady on her arm, awoke a heat in her chest that rivaled the soulless core. Suddenly, the ground heaved. The floor cracked wide beneath them. Kalira's boots slipped. She caught a jagged ledge, fingers burning from the strain. Reese dove, catching her wrist in a grip of iron, his muscles straining as he hauled her up. Without hesitation, he slung her over his shoulder, and together they rappelled down a crumbling shaft, plunging into the molten tunnels beneath the sanctum. The heat struck them like a wall, suffocating, relentless. Kalira gasped, her armor's cooling units whining in protest. Sweat beaded at her hairline, ritual markings blurring as she staggered forward. "Wonderful," she muttered, voice dry, armor struggling to compensate. Reese shrugged, scanning the twisted labyrinth of ancient mines and lava tubes. "Could be worse. At least we're not topside." He stripped off his scorched shoulder plates, letting them clang to the ground. The gesture was practical, yet, somehow, intimate. Kalira hesitated, glancing down at her ornate armor. Reluctantly, she began removing the heavy plates. Reese stepped closer, voice softer, his fingers gentle as he helped unclasp the intricate buckles. The relief was immediate, cool air prickling her skin through the fitted underlayer. She paused, eyes drawn to the pale lines crossing his ribcage. "What's this one?" she asked, tracing a jagged scar on his side. He winced, but didn't pull away. "Mining collapse. On Tarsus. Lost some good people. The words were weighted, old pain flickering behind his eyes. She nodded, and together they pressed deeper, sweat slicking their skin, boots crunching on fractured rock. The air shimmered with rising heat, the core pulsing a steady thrum at Kalira's side. "Tell me about your world," Reese said, breaking the tense silence. Kalira's steps faltered, voice catching on memory. "Lysara is ancient. Our star is fading. The soulless core could buy us centuries. If it fails, my people perish." Her words were even, but beneath them lay an ocean of grief. They paused in a shadowed cavern, catching their breath. The walls glowed faintly with bioluminescent moss, painting ghostly patterns across their faces. "Your turn," Kalira said. "Why risk your life for credits?" Reese shrugged, gaze distant. "Credits don't lie. People do." His smile was bitter, carved from old wounds. "Trust is a luxury I can't afford." Kalira studied him, seeing beyond the armor to the scars beneath, both flesh and spirit. "Someone betrayed you," she said quietly. He nodded, jaw tight. "Always happens. The trick is not letting it break you." A deep tremor rattled the tunnel. Kalira felt her time slipping away, the weight of destiny pressing harder on her shoulders. "We should move," Reese said, voice brisk. As Kalira stood, she faltered, blood staining her suit, a searing pain blossoming at her hip. She'd been hit during the skirmish, adrenaline masking the wound until now. "You're hurt," Reese said, concern flaring through his gruffness. "It's nothing," she lied, bracing herself against the wall. "It's not." Reese knelt, pulling a medkit from his belt. His hands were deft, careful as he peeled back the suit and applied a cooling salve, the touch gentler than she expected. Kalira exhaled shakily, letting herself lean into his hands, savoring the fleeting closeness. Their eyes met, the shadows around them deep and silent. Something unspoken passed between them, trust, fragile and new. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely above the tunnel's quiet hum. "Don't mention it," he replied, voice low, gaze lingering on her a heartbeat longer than duty required. They gathered their gear and pressed onward, deeper into the molten dark, the heat of the tunnels nothing compared to the fire now growing between them. Reese's comm scanner flickered as they crouched in the shadow of a collapsed shaft, stray sparks lighting the cramped, stifling dark. Kalira pressed close, her bare shoulder brushing his arm, a jolt of heat passing between them, sharp and unexpected, as the world above them shuddered and groaned. "There," Reese murmured, voice pitched low. He adjusted a dial with gloved fingers. "Open channel. Let's listen." Static fizzed, then resolved into voices, one guttural and furious, the other icy with command. Varkos's voice crackled through, battered and breathless. "Target located, but extraction's a mess. Lost most of my crew to the human." The bitterness was thick, his pride wounded by defeat. A colder, familiar voice answered, each syllable a dagger. "Acceptable losses. The soulless core is all that matters. Deliver it." "The princess must not survive. The Chancellor's orders." Kalira's breath caught, her hand clamped involuntarily on Reese's arm. That voice. She would have known it anywhere. Chancellor Sareth, her father's most trusted advisor. The man who had tutored her in statecraft, who had stood at her coronation, who had sworn to protect Lysara at all costs. Sareth continued, voice devoid of remorse. "Make it look like an accident. The planet's collapse is perfect cover. The princess dies a martyr, the core vanishes. Then I recover it and save our world. The people will have no choice but to follow me." The transmission ended, the calm hissing in the silence that followed. Kalira stared ahead, the weight of Sareth's betrayal crashing over her like an avalanche. The mission, the hope of her people, had never been about salvation. It was about erasing her from the line, making way for a tyrant to seize power. He was like family, she whispered, voice fraying at the edges. Her hand trembled on Reese's sleeve. He's a traitor, Reese said, blunt and unyielding. And he wants you dead. She doubled over, pain and betrayal twisting her insides. I trusted him. He raised me when my father was lost to the plague. I thought. Her words broke off, choked. I know, Reese said, voice unexpectedly gentle. He touched her shoulder, grounding her. But he's just another vulture after power. Kalira's eyes burned, her composure cracked wide open. How do you live with it? The betrayal? Reese's expression turned inward, haunted by old memories. You stop trusting anyone. Only person you can count on is yourself. She shook her head, voice raw. That's not living. It's surviving. A tremor rolled through the earth, a savage shudder that sent dust spiraling around them. Far above, the thunder of collapsing stone echoed, reminding them both that the world's end was accelerating. We have to move, Reese said, urgency cutting through the aftermath of revelation. Kalira stayed crouched, despair curling around her. Maybe it's pointless, she murmured. If I die, at least the core saves my people. Maybe that's enough. Reese's jaw clenched, eyes hard. Under a tyrant's rule? Sareth will use it for himself. You think he'll stop with the core? He'll crush anyone who stands in his way, including the people you want to save. You don't know that, she protested, though her voice wavered. I know enough. His tone was steely. He's willing to kill for it. He just tried to kill you. Kalira hugged her knees to her chest, eyes glistening in the dim. Then what do I do? Her voice was small, stripped of the authority she wore like armor. Reese leaned close, his conviction burning through her despair. You survive. You get off this world, take the core home, and make him pay. I'll help you. The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Kalira searched his face, seeing not just resolve, but something deeper, loyalty, and perhaps the beginnings of something far more dangerous. Why? She asked softly, her voice trembling between hope and disbelief. Reese's gaze didn't flinch. Because I've seen what happens when monsters win. I won't let it happen again. She let him help her up, his hands steady around hers. For the first time since the sanctum, a flicker of hope warmed her chest. Not the blinding, impossible hope of the soulless core, but something smaller, more human, alive in the space between them. The mission's changed, she said, voice steadier, resolve knitting itself back together. This is more than escape. It's war. Reese's tone was grim, but there was a hint of pride beneath it. They were no longer running, they were fighting. They pressed deeper into the tunnels, the labyrinth of molten rock and ancient machinery swallowing them. Every step echoed with betrayal, but Kalira drew strength from Reese's presence at her side. Sareth had made a fatal mistake. He had taught her how to fight, and now she would turn that training against him. Kalira's fury was cold, her royal composure shed like old armor. Only the need for justice remained, burning in her veins. I'm going back, she said suddenly, voice icy and implacable. I'll end Sareth myself. She spun on her heel, but Reese's hand shot out, catching her wrist with unyielding strength. No, you won't. Her eyes flashed. Let go. Not until you're thinking clearly, he replied, calm but unmovable. In one smooth motion, he pinned her gently against the jagged wall, his body shielding her from the raw edges of grief and rage. Going back is suicide, he said, his breath warm on her cheek. You want justice, you have to live. I don't care about living, she whispered, the words torn from the depths of loss. Make it count. You can't if you're dead. His grip was gentle but absolute, refusing to yield. She struggled, anger and desperation warring in her chest, but his strength anchored her. For a moment, she hated him for it. then realized she needed it more than anything. "Why do you care?" she breathed, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Reese hesitated, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his face. "Because you're more than a job." The confession hung in the air, shimmering with possibility. She was acutely aware of every point of contact, the heat of his body, the shelter of his arms, the steadiness in his eyes. "I've never felt so powerless," she admitted, her mask slipping away. "All my training means nothing. I don't know how to fight this." "You're not powerless. You're learning a new kind of strength." His thumb brushed her pulse, steady and reassuring, sending shivers through her. Kailira closed her eyes, letting herself lean into him, trusting, just for a heartbeat. For the first time, she allowed herself to be protected. It felt less like surrender and more like freedom. "What now?" she asked, voice small but resolute. "We survive. We get the core home. We make Sereth answer for what he's done. Together." His words were a lifeline, binding them in a cause greater than either alone. "I don't know how to fight betrayal," she admitted. "You'll learn," Reese said, voice low. "Or he wins." He released her slowly, his fingers lingering for a breath before falling away. Kailira flexed her claws, feeling the echo of his touch long after he'd stepped back. Something in her had shifted, grief and rage refining into something harder, sharper. She would not be broken. "How far to the landing site?" she asked, pulling herself upright. 10, maybe 12 kilometers, Reese answered, already scanning the winding tunnels ahead. "Through the deep vents, the Noxians will be waiting." Kailira's jaw set, eyes fierce. "Let them. I'm not the same princess who entered the sanctum." Reese paused, studying her. "Who are you now?" She met his gaze unflinching, amber eyes shining with new resolve. "Someone who trusts a human mercenary more than her own people." He smiled, the expression brief and almost fond. "I never promised you anything." "Haven't you?" she challenged, stepping closer until only a breath separated them. The air between them crackled with unspoken things. "You promised to keep me alive, to help me fight, to see this through." "Those weren't promises," he said, voice rough with feeling. "They were warnings." "Good," she said, a fierce smile breaking through the pain, her spirit rekindled by the fire in his eyes. A vent erupted, sending a blast of scalding steam and molten debris roaring down the tunnel. Kailira's reflexes, honed by a lifetime of training, snapped her sideways just in time to avoid the worst. But a jagged chunk of stone, searing with heat, slammed into her back and drove her to her knees. She tasted metal, vision blurring as agony radiated down her spine. Her breath shuddered out, catching on a moan she barely managed to swallow. Reese's voice sliced through the roaring in her ears. "Kailira! Where are you hurt?" His boots skidded across the stone, urgency in every step. She gasped, words torn from her in ragged bursts. "Back! Suits! Burned in!" The pain crested, white-hot and unrelenting. For a moment, she felt herself slipping, the world narrowing to a tunnel of fire and darkness. Strong arms caught her before she crumpled, holding her upright. "Easy! I've got you." Reese's voice was a lifeline, steady and grounding, as he half carried her to a shallow alcove shielded from the worst of the heat. The coolness there was a mercy, though it could do little to dull the agony flaring along her spine. "How bad?" she managed, teeth clenched. Reese knelt behind her, brow furrowed as he assessed the damage. "Bad," he said, voice clipped. "Turn around." Kailira obeyed, bracing herself on the rock wall as he gently peeled aside the scorched edge of her suit. His hands were careful but unflinching. Even the lightest touch sent fresh waves of pain rippling through her. "That bad?" she forced out, struggling for composure. "Third-degree burns. Suit's melted in. I'll have to cut it away." Reese's tone was grim, but his hands never faltered. She wanted to protest, to tell him to wait, but the pain was already threatening to overwhelm her. She nodded once, jaw tight, and gripped the stone so hard her claws left grooves. The sound of Reese's knife slicing through the fused fabric was shockingly intimate, close, precise, a kind of trust she had never given so freely before. He worked quickly but with infinite care, pausing when she stiffened, murmuring reassurances. "Hold still," he whispered, voice gentler than she'd ever heard. "This'll hurt." Kalira bit down on her lip, refusing to give voice to the scream building in her chest. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to focus on the rhythm of Reese's breathing, the quiet strength in his hands. Blood trickled down her back, mingling with the scent of burned synth fiber and scorched skin. "Damn," Reese muttered under his breath as he peeled away the last stubborn strip. "You're lucky. Any lower and you'd be paralyzed." He fished through his battered medkit, extracting a vial and a sterile pad. "I'm cleaning it and applying gel." "It'll help." His tone was matter-of-fact, but she heard the tension beneath the surface. The cold antiseptic burned like acid, but his touch never wavered. The pain was sharp, but it was the pain of hope, a pain that meant she was still alive, still fighting. Reese's fingers were more gentle than any healer she'd known, careful not to aggravate the wound as he spread a thick, cooling gel over the raw flesh. Kalira focused on the steady in and out of his breath, letting it anchor her through the storm. She could feel the roughness of his hands, the steadiness that came from years of survival and loss. "You've done this before," she said, voice muffled by the stone. "Combat medic, once," Reese replied, the words clipped but soft. "Can't get paid if the client dies." But there was something else in his voice, a care that went beyond duty. She swallowed, gathering the courage to ask, "Why this job? Why me?" Reese hesitated, dabbing at the edges of her burn. "The pay was good. But I've seen worlds die. Didn't want to see yours join them." Kalira turned, wincing at the movement, trying to read his expression. He kept his eyes down, focused on her wound, but she saw the flicker of something raw beneath his calm. "You care," she said softly. He paused, hands frozen mid-motion. "I care about finishing the job," he replied, but the words rang hollow in the close air. "No," she pressed, her voice gaining strength. "You care about me." Reese's hands stilled entirely. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant rumble of the planet's slow collapse. Finally, he said, "You're reading too much into it, Princess. This is business." "Is it?" she whispered, turning fully in his arms, ignoring the flare of pain. Face to face, she saw the turmoil in his eyes, a storm of fear, longing, and something that looked very much like hope. "Because this feels like more." Reese's jaw clenched. "It's not," he insisted, but his resolve was crumbling. His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs brushing the ritual markings along her cheekbones, tracing the lines as if memorizing them. "Why not?" she challenged, voice trembling with vulnerability and defiance. He searched her face, his mask slipping. "Because I'm a mercenary. You're a princess. When this is over, you'll go home. I'll disappear. Caring gets you killed." "And yet, here you are," she said, leaning into his touch. "Risking everything." "Here I am," he admitted, voice rough and low. The moment stretched between them, full of longing and fear. Kalira could feel the heat of his body, the strength of his arms, the rapid thrum of his heart beneath his armor. For the first time since the world began to fall apart, she wanted something for herself, not duty, not destiny, just this. "Reese," she whispered, her voice a plea and a promise. Her name on his lips was a curse and a benediction. "Damn it," he muttered, and pulled her to him. His mouth crashed onto hers, hard and desperate, as if he could drive back the end of the world with a kiss. Their bodies pressed together, her hands tangled in his hair, his gripping her waist and pulling her closer. The kiss was raw, hungry, a collision of need and fear, and the fierce spark that had been burning between them since the sanctum. Kaelira lost herself in the sensation. The taste of him, the scent of sweat and ash, the overwhelming certainty that she would never be the same. When they broke apart, both were breathless, hearts pounding in frantic tandem. "This is madness," Rhys said, voice ragged. "Yes," she agreed, a shaky smile blooming through the pain. "But it's real." He cupped her cheek, thumb lingering on her skin. "When we get out—" "We'll figure it out," she interrupted, refusing to let the future steal this moment. "Right now, I just want you here." He searched her face, looking for doubt, but found only certainty and desire. Something inside him broke and mended at once. "The gel needs time to set," he said finally, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard. "We should rest." "Together," she replied, no hesitation in her tone. "Together," he promised, and the word felt like an oath. They settled side by side on the uneven stone, Kaelira's head pillowed on Rhys's chest, his arm wrapped around her. The heat of her wound faded, replaced by the warmth of his touch and the steady rise and fall of his breath. For a little while, the end of the world seemed distant, held at bay by the fragile peace they'd forged in the darkness, two survivors, bound by pain and hope, daring to want more than survival. The navigation beacon pulsed in Rhys's palm, its signal leading them into the mouth of a colossal cavern. Walls arched high above, veined with magma that shimmered and crawled beneath a crust of cooling stone, the air thick with heat and the constant bone-shaking roar of fire. Ahead, a river of molten rock wound across the cavern floor, wide, deadly, impossible to cross by ordinary means. On the far bank, against the crimson glow, Kaelira could just make out the silhouette of their extraction point. A battered Lissari shuttle, its hull gleaming faintly in the infernal light. Rhys checked his scanner, brow furrowed. Only one bridge. Kaelira followed his gaze. A skeletal span of ancient alloy arched over the river, warped and pitted by centuries of heat. Chunks of it glowed dull red, handrails corroded to lacework, the whole structure sagging under its own weight. "That bridge is barely holding," she said, voice taut as she eyed the treacherous span. "It's our only shot," Rhys replied, jaw set. A warning flashed on his scanner. Noxians, closing fast. He eyed the readout, pulse steady despite the odds. 8, maybe more. Varkos with them. Kaelira looked to the bridge, then to Rhys. "Then we cross," she said, resolve ringing in her voice. "Better to die trying." The first shot sizzled through the cavern, a line of energy bolts stitched the stone at their feet, sending up sprays of molten rock. Rhys swung his rifle up, returning fire with precise bursts, each shot buying them another second. "Go!" he barked. "I'll cover you!" Kaelira didn't hesitate. She sprinted for the bridge, feet pounding on the cracked stone, heat rising in suffocating waves. The ancient metal screamed as she set foot on the span, its surface burning through the thin soles of her boots. Each step was a gamble. The alloy groaned and flexed beneath her, threatening to give way at any moment. Rhys fell back, firing in controlled bursts, picking off Noxians as they poured into the cavern. A grenade arced from his hand, detonating in a burst of fire and shrapnel that sent 2 raiders tumbling into the lava below. The rest scattered, hissing curses, red eyes gleaming from behind cracked visors. Kaelira pressed on, hand clutching the warped handrail for balance. The bridge swayed violently, cables fraying and snapping in the infernal heat. Molten rock licked at the supports below, illuminating her path with hellish light. She heard the bridge groan, felt the structure tremble under the weight of pursuit. Halfway across, Kaelira heard it, a sharp, metallic snap. The walkway tilted alarmingly, one end dropping several feet as a main cable gave way with a shriek. She pitched forward, arms flailing, and barely caught a support strut before her feet slid out from under her. For a heartbeat, she dangled over the lava, the heat clawing at her exposed skin. "It's collapsing!" she shouted, voice raw with terror and effort. "Keep moving!" Reese called back, his voice thunderous over the roar of fire. But as she struggled upright, the way ahead buckled and folded, one section of walkway sloughing off and tumbling into the river of molten rock below. The path was gone, the far side now separated by a yawning, deadly gap. Reese was already on the bridge, fighting a running battle. Noxians swarmed behind him, Varkos's voice carrying across the cavern. "End them! The core is ours!" Kylira pressed herself against the rail, heart hammering. Reese reached her, breath ragged, eyes wild. The bridge was sagging badly now, each step sending up jets of superheated steam. Their pursuers were closing in, blasters spitting energy bolts that sizzled through the air. "We're trapped," she said, calm settling over her like a final shroud. "No," Reese said, his voice low and certain. "We're not." He holstered his weapon and stepped close, his presence a wall between her and the chaos behind. Without hesitation, he swept her into his arms, lifting her effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing. Kylira felt the surge of power in him, muscle and purpose and something more than human. "Hold tight," he said, tightening his grip. "Reese, what are you—" she began, but he cut her off with a look that brooked no argument. "Trust me," he said. He gathered himself, muscles coiling beneath her. The bridge groaned, the supports beginning to unravel. Reese broke into a sprint, boots pounding on the failing metal, Kylira clinging to him as the bridge pitched and swayed beneath their combined weight. The world narrowed to the sound of his breath and the roar of fire below. At the edge of the gap, Reese didn't slow. He launched himself into the air, every muscle straining, Kylira pressed tight against his chest. For a heartbeat, they soared over the river of fire. The heat snatched the breath from her lungs, sweat beading on her brow. Kylira felt the impossible strength in his arms, the sheer will that drove them across the void. They hit the far side hard, Reese twisting mid-fall to take the brunt of the landing. They tumbled across the stone, Kylira cradled against him, shielded from the impact. Behind them, the bridge gave a final agonized wail and collapsed into the lava, taking 2 Noxians and the pursuing Varkos with it. A chorus of screams echoed, then were swallowed by the molten river. Kylira blinked, disoriented, adrenaline singing through her veins. Reese was already pushing up, checking her over with brisk efficiency. "Incredible," she whispered, voice trembling with awe and disbelief. Reese just nodded, brushing ash from her hair, eyes scanning for new threats. His breathing was steady, almost inhumanly calm. Kylira watched him, something electric passing between them, gratitude, admiration, and a question she could no longer ignore. She caught his hand, searching his face. "What are you?" she breathed, wonder and suspicion mingling in her voice. Reese met her gaze, something inscrutable in his eyes. "I'm the one getting you home," he said simply, not breaking stride. He pulled her to her feet, steadied her when she wobbled. Kylira's heart raced, not from fear, but from the memory of his impossible leap, the way his arms had held her like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. They hurried across the last stretch of scorched stone, the heat of the cavern fading behind them. Each step toward the extraction shuttle felt heavier and more meaningful. Kylira's feelings for Reese deepened with every stride, tangled with gratitude and something deeper, more dangerous. The shuttle loomed ahead, hatch open and engines spooling up, ready to whisk them away from the dying world. Kylira glanced at Reese, her doubts dissolving in the certainty of his presence. Whatever he was, whatever he had become for her, she knew this. She trusted him. And for the first time since the core was taken, hope was more than a distant flame. It was a promise, burning between them as they raced together toward whatever future waited on the far side of the fire. The medbay aboard the shuttle was a sanctuary of sterile light, the low hum of its systems a soothing contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. Kylira sat upright on the diagnostic bed, the automed's articulated arms gliding over her back and shoulders, bandaging what flesh the gel had not yet healed. She barely noticed the sting. Her gaze was fixed out the viewport, where Lyrae's surface rippled with fire, the planet writhing in its final convulsions. The sky was a tapestry of ember storms and ruptured clouds, tectonic scars glowing as the world's heart unraveled. Reese stood at the far side of the medbay, a dark silhouette against the containment case. The soulless core floated within, its light pulsing in slow, powerful waves, gold and white, like a star held in a cage of crystal and alloy. He watched it as if mesmerized, shoulders broad and battered, the wounds of the day forgotten in the presence of something so impossibly alive. "It's beautiful," he said at last, voice low with awe. "Hard to believe it could save a world." "If it works," Kylira replied, her words colored with pain and uncertainty. She winced as the automed sealed a stubborn burn. "If Sareth hasn't seized power, if my people still trust me—" "Stop." Reese's voice was gentle but firm. He turned, blue-gray eyes searching hers. "You're spiraling." She gave a tired, humorless laugh. "I'm being realistic. I'm one princess with a stolen relic. Sareth has everything: loyalists, the military, the narrative. What do I have?" Reese crossed to her in 3 strides, hands braced on either side of her seat. "You have me," he said simply. The words sent a warmth through her, banishing the cold shadow of doubt. She looked up, saw the resolve in his eyes. Unyielding, stubborn, impossibly certain. "One mercenary against a regime?" she teased, voice trembling between fear and hope. "One very stubborn mercenary," he replied, a lopsided grin breaking through the intensity. "And I always finish what I start." The automed chimed softly, signaling the end of its cycle. Kylira flexed her shoulders, the pain dulled to a distant throb. She stood, testing her movement. Her limbs were stiff, but she was whole. She strode to the terminal, fingertips gliding over the interface. "Speaking of compensation," she said, activating a transfer with a flick of her wrist. The sum that appeared on Reese's datapad was enormous, enough to buy a fleet or vanish for a lifetime. A bonus glimmered at the bottom of the contract, an unspoken thank you for services rendered. Reese's eyebrows shot up. "That's generous." She met his gaze. "For services beyond the contract." He stared at the datapad, expression shifting from surprise to something more troubled. "Kylira." His voice was serious, almost pained. "I can't take this." She blinked, taken aback. "Why not?" He hesitated, thumb tracing the edge of the datapad, as if the answer could be found in the circuits. "Because it feels like payment for something I never offered for sale." Color flared in her cheeks. "That's not what I meant." "I know." He set the datapad aside, stepping closer. His voice was gentler now, the rough edges worn away. "But what happened between us isn't business. It's real." Kylira's breath caught. She stepped into his space, hand coming to rest on his chest. She could feel the steady, reassuring beat of his heart, the warmth of his skin beneath the battered fabric of his undershirt. "Contract fulfilled," she said, voice steady. "You got me off Leary, protected the core, kept your word. What now?" Reese's eyes searched hers, blue-gray and unreadable. "That depends. Are you offering a new deal?" "I'm offering a choice," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Walk away, no regrets. Or stay, help me reclaim my world, stop Sareth, save my people. It won't be easy. You know what we're up against." He caught her hand, his palm rough and warm over hers. "And the terms?" he asked, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Negotiable," she whispered, meeting his gaze without flinching. Reese fell silent, the gravity of the moment settling over them. She watched him weigh the decision, felt the tension in his shoulders, the fear and longing tangled in his breath. Her heart hammered beneath his hand, every second stretching into eternity. Finally, he spoke, voice raw. "I've spent my life running from ties, from people who might matter. Now I'm looking at someone who makes me want to stand and fight, even if we lose." Kalira smiled, the expression bittersweet. "The odds are impossible." He grinned, reckless and unafraid. "Good. I like impossible." She laughed, unable to hide her relief. She cupped his face in her hands, claws gentle as they traced the line of his jaw. "You're sure? There's no going back. If you stay, you're part of this, part of me." He didn't hesitate. "I'm sure. One condition. We do this together. Equals. No more mercenary, no more royalty. Partners." "Partners," she agreed, sealing it with a word as sacred as any vow. He pulled her close, arms circling her waist. Their kiss was a promise, fierce and tender, a seal beyond contracts or duty. Hope and possibility mingled in the heat between them, the taste of a future they could build together. "So, partners?" she asked when they finally parted, her voice husky with emotion. "Partners," he replied, smiling, "though I suspect our partnership will be eventful." "Eventful?" she teased, arching an elegant brow. Reese grinned, mischief dancing in his eyes. He kissed her again, deeper this time, hands sliding into her hair as she pressed against him. Her claws traced the lines of his shoulders, relearning every scar, every hard-earned victory etched in his flesh. "Like that," he murmured, lips brushing her ear. She laughed, breathless, her whole body alive with relief and anticipation. "Think it'll interfere with the mission?" He shrugged, mouth curving in a wicked smile. "Oh, I think it'll make things far more interesting." Kalira smiled into his chest, the weight of the day finally easing. They stood together in the pale light, the remnants of Leary's dying fire reflected in the viewport. But inside the medbay, hope burned bright and fierce. Whatever came next, war, revolution, the long fight to reclaim a world, they would face it together, partners. And for the first time since the darkness began, Kalira felt truly unstoppable. The shuttle captain's hands hovered above the controls, knuckles white with tension. He'd ferried desperate scientists, smuggling rings, even a high priest once, but never a Lisari princess and a human mercenary, never with a star's worth of power humming in a containment case at his feet. The bridge was washed in the cool blue of hyperspace, but the air crackled with anticipation. As the shuttle neared Lisari space, tension mounted. The comms console flickered, its screen pulsing with an urgent priority channel. The captain's voice was tight as he turned in his seat. "Princess, we're receiving priority comms. The Chancellor demands immediate contact." Kalira didn't move at first. She stood near the viewport, arms folded, the sweep of her hair catching the artificial starlight. Behind her, Reese sat on a cargo crate, methodically cleaning his sidearm. For 3 days they had prepared, plotting strategy, revising escape routes, trading intelligence. But the magnetic pull between them had only grown stronger, every glance and every brush of fingers, another unspoken promise, another spark in the quiet dark of the ship. She answered without looking away from the stars. "Tell the Chancellor I'll speak to him, when I'm ready." The captain hesitated, sweat beading at his temple. "He's insistent." Kalira turned, her expression regal and unyielding. "I survived a dying world. He can wait." The captain's shoulders dropped, relief softening his posture. He sent the message, and the tense silence eased. The power in Kalira's bearing, no longer the naive, nervous princess, was unmistakable. Reese looked up from his gear, eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "Enjoying this?" She flashed a sharp smile. Very much. Sareth thinks I'm still the naive princess. He'll learn otherwise. Reese's gaze lingered, admiration and concern mingling in the lines of his face. And your father? He asked, voice gentle. Her smile faded, shadows passing through her eyes. If he's alive, he's likely imprisoned or worse. Sareth wouldn't risk open rebellion by leaving him free. Reese set aside his rifle, as if the logistics of toppling a regime were no more daunting than patching a hull breach. Then we free him first, he said, matter of fact. We? She teased, arching an eyebrow. Partners, remember? His answer was quiet but absolute. He rose and approached the containment case, the soulless core's golden light flickering over his battered features. Your benefits package is impressive, by the way. Her laugh was rich, ringing through the utilitarian cabin. I haven't offered you benefits yet. Haven't you? Reese replied, voice low and teasing. 3 days in close quarters with you, princess. The benefits are obvious. She closed the distance between them, drawn by the electricity thrumming in the air. Reese, she said softly, reaching for his hand. He laced his fingers with hers, thumb brushing her knuckles. I know what you'll say. It's complicated. There's a mission. No time for distractions. Kalira shook her head, resolve glimmering in her eyes. Actually, I'm done pretending. He cupped her face, his hands gentle but unyielding. Are you sure? His voice was rough, colored with longing and warning. No going back. I stopped wanting simple the moment you carried me across a river of fire, she whispered, leaning into his touch. Besides, you said the terms were negotiable. A smile tugged at his lips. They are. What do you propose? She answered not with words, but with a kiss, pouring her longing, her gratitude, her hope into him. He responded with matching hunger, arms pulling her close, the kiss deepening until she was breathless. It was honest, undeniable, stripped of pretense. For a moment, the galaxy narrowed to the space between their bodies and the press of his mouth on hers. When at last they parted, her hands lingered at his shoulders, feeling the heat of his skin beneath the fabric. I want you, she breathed, not as a bodyguard, but as my partner, in battle, in life, in my heart. Reese's voice was rough, his confession raw. If you'll have me, Kalira, I've wanted you since the sanctum. Not the title, not the power, just you. She smiled, her eyes fierce. Then stop talking, she whispered, drawing him into another kiss, deeper, more real. Her hands tangled in his hair, while his found the small of her back, drawing her flush against him. They broke apart only when breath was a desperate need. He pressed his forehead to hers, laughing softly. The cabin, she gasped. Yes, he agreed, his voice a rumble in her ear. With ease, he lifted her, her legs winding around his waist as he carried her through the narrow passage to the small quarters reserved for royal passengers. Behind them, the containment case pulsed with the heartbeat of a star. In the safety of the cabin, urgency dissolved into something more tender, more infinite. Kalira's hands explored the hard lines of his shoulders, the old scars and new wounds, each one a testament to the life he'd lived before her, each one now claimed by her touch. Reese traced the markings along her spine, memorizing the shape of her, the power and vulnerability, the promise of everything they had yet to fight for. In those stolen hours, words became unnecessary. They spoke instead in caresses and laughter, in whispered confessions, and the fierce joining of lips and hands. Every barrier between princess and mercenary, between duty and desire, fell away. Later, wrapped in tangled sheets in each other's arms, Kalira watched the hyperspace tunnels streaming by outside the small porthole. Reese's heartbeat echoed beneath her palm, steady and sure. The ache of uncertainty still lingered. Her father's fate, the coming conflict with Sareth, the burden of the soulless core. But she was no longer alone in it. She was stronger, more dangerous, remade by fire and by love. Reese brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're thinking again," he teased. She grinned, nipping his jaw. "Just strategizing. You know, how to break into a high-security palace, rescue a king, and start a revolution." He laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "You make it sound so easy." She rolled on top of him, pinning him with her knees. "With the right partner, anything is possible." He caught her hands, kissing her knuckles. "I intend to test that theory, thoroughly." She kissed him again, fierce and hungry, every touch a vow for what came next. In that moment, there was no princess, no mercenary, just equals, bound by fate and choice. As the shuttle sped toward an uncertain future, Kalira knew she was changed forever. The girl who entered the sanctum was gone, replaced by a woman who could love fiercely and fight without mercy. And at her side was a partner who matched her in fire, resolve, and hope. Together they would face whatever came next. That's the end of the story. You can leave us a tip or become a channel member. This greatly helps our team improve the quality of our videos. You can send a tip using the Super Thanks button right below the video. We truly appreciate each and every one of you who has subscribed and supported us. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.